Alright guys, welcome to RC Mojo. This week we're going to be putting together the new body for the leaf sprung RGT. But first, let's have a look at the lead up to the project. A few weeks ago I got myself a cheap 3D printer. I've been printing off various bits and bobs I found designs for, including some parts to help stiffen up the printer itself. Early on I found a Series 2 body on Thingiverse. I say Series 2 quite loosely though, as other than the front panel being sunken, it looks a lot more like a late Defender. It does have all the parts though. There's a make on the page too, and after some smoothing of the panels and adding some details, it does look quite acceptable, but it isn't quite what I wanted. A few years ago I used Google SketchUp to mock up layouts of the inside of PCs. I went to download a current copy, but it seems it's long since not been a Google product. The 2017 edition does have a free desktop version though, and it seems quite similar to what I remembered. After some work, which was made much harder because I kept having to look things up on how to use SketchUp, I had the STL files from Thingiverse imported and assembled on a mock chassis. Don't worry too much about the slightly odd dimensions, I hadn't figured out how to set them precisely at this point. You can see all the odd bits a bit clearer now. The bonnet for a start is far too tall and angular. You can see the gaps in the corners of the front panel too. From the side, rather than a nice curvy roof, it ends rather abruptly. Now I suppose you could argue that it's a pickup conversion with a chopped up roof. The rear overhang is way below the sill, and the front, which does look a bit weird. From the back it looks like it's been vertically stretched. The windscreen and roof have the round tops to them that the later Land Rovers had. I do like the windscreen wipers though. There's a few more bits that aren't quite right of course. It's a good effort, but it's going to work a treat as a base to work from. So here we are after much faffing about, the updated Series 2. You can see the front panel has moved back a bit and now has the platform at the bottom. The bonnet's been flattened out and now fits the front panel. From the side you can see the rear overhang is now somewhat near correct. The bottom of the rear panel is level with the front, so it should sit on the bumpers on the RC chassis and be level. From the back we've got the nice curvy roof and rear windows, although not quite right, they are a lot closer than the original. On the inside there's lots of overlaps that's going to help the whole structure stay nice and sturdy. The only thing I haven't really worried about are the fits and clearances, so when we put it together there's going to be quite a bit of sanding to get it all lined up. We'll be looking at well under 0.5 mm though, so it should be quite quick. After a lot of printing, many hours including a few failed prints, we have a stack of plastic parts. I reckon there must be well over 100 hours in that lot. 3D printers are great tools, but they do take rather a long time with the larger prints. I did try a time-lapse of one of the taller prints. I've got a Raspberry Pi running the printer now, so I had it record the bed liner. The quality is pretty low and the camera doesn't have an infrared filter, so the colours are a bit funky, but you can see the build. Quite neat, even if it's probably the least interesting part. It's more or less just one big monolith. I've done some experiments with glue and found that cyanoacrylate works a treat with PLA plastic. You can see where I sanded the rough surface so the parts fitted together at the right height. The roughed up plastic will really give the glue something to bite into. Usually I'd use one of these permagrit sanding blocks. They're super flat and they're easy to clean out if they start to get clogged. The problem is the sanding surface doesn't quite go all the way to the edge, which won't work here as we need to get right into the corners. Instead I found this block. It's from the Seagull Challenger build we did some time ago. It's only a hard bit of balsa, but it's going to work perfectly for getting into the corners and keeping everything nice and flat. All we do is sand the surfaces that will end up getting glued until the bits that are supposed to be level on the outside are. It's already fairly close, so it's only going to take a couple of minutes to get a good fit. And there we go. With the two bits held together, the join is nice and smooth. Just what we want. All we do now is run some glue along the faces. I'm using quite a bit, so it's all going to get squeezed into all the nooks and crannies. It's a gap-filling cyano, so it shouldn't all evaporate like the thin stuff. To stop it moving, a couple of large bulldog clips work a treat. The glue grabs almost immediately, but it's always a bit delicate for half an hour or so. It's always a good idea to clamp it up and let it dry. The next fun bit are the headlights. The buckets are of course printed, but they don't have any fitting for an LED. We could use 5mm LEDs, or perhaps even those Chinese headlights with the multiple surface mount LEDs on a PCB that's for the TRX4. But I think they're going to be too bright, as the full size would have had the old Fireflies in Jam Jar specials. So what I'm using is a pair of 8mm straw hat LEDs. The diameter matches the size of the other LEDs we're going to end up fitting, but they're extra short and give a nice wide lighting angle. They should also fit nice and comfortably inside the buckets and give a nice broad glow. Right now though, there's no holes. Now we could just drill an 8mm hole in the back, but since these LEDs are so short, I'm going to drill 2 small holes for the legs to poke through. With any luck, we won't get any meaningful light leaking out the back, so it's going to make the lighting install that bit easier to do. To hold the LEDs in, all we're going to do is use a couple of spots of Sino and pop them in. To the front next. The front panel needs the grille gluing in. Now the grille is unmodified and it looks okay, but the mesh is a bit thick. I'm going to use it for now though, but I think I might make a new one and see if my printer will print a finer mesh. It's tricky as the grille is already a bit delicate, but then half the fun of having a 3D printer is in the experimentation. The rest of the build is more or less just a case of sand to fit, add glue, clamp the parts together, so I think we're going to fast forward through most of it. Now I should probably say I'm not really an expert with 3D printers. I'm learning and experimenting as I go. With this build I've learnt a few things. The first thing is the panels are way too thick. The body weighs an absolute ton. Just by halving the thickness of the panel we'd save a lot of weight, and I think it would still be strong enough. The other thing that really stood out was how difficult it was to get the rear panel to line up. It needs to be interlocking or self-jigging, same with the window parts. The only downside would be the fit would have to be a lot more precise. Right, so that's most of the build done, we're just waiting for the roof. Now this was recorded at about 11 PM on Friday night. I've not got the print speed set all that fast, actually it's really quite slow. I found with the speed turned up, even with the extra Y-axis bracing, it starts to get a bit wobbly. I think it's the entire top of the printer flexing now, so I'll have to come up with something to triangulate the top. Either way, the roof is now finished. If we look at the display, you can see it took 11 hours and 58 minutes. It would be really nice to shave at least a couple of hours off that for the bigger prints. With the roof glued on, the body is complete. Well, I have some headlight lenses printed too, with some transparent PLA, but I want to try and polish them before fitting. We can bring the RGT chassis back now and remove the stock body. Now I'm not sure how we're going to keep the Land Rover on at the moment. We might end up using the stock body posts, but using them as locators rather than to hold the body on by themselves. I feel that good old magnets might end up in there somewhere. I'm going to swap the stock wheels and tyres for these ones that I've had for ages. They're axial plastic beadlocks with custom Delrin rock rings I got from someone on RC Crawler years ago. For tyres, they're proper RC four-wheel drive mud thrashers. Also, since the last time you saw the chassis, I swapped the Tamiya connector on the ESC to an XT60 so I can use my 2S lipos. Right then, let's see if it fits. To keep it in place for now, I'm just going to use a few blobs of blue tack. 2 on the rear bumper and 2 on the front of the chassis. We can press the body into position and the blue tack should just about stop it from falling off. Well, I think it looks okay, maybe a bit on the high side, and considering the dampers are bottomed out with the weight, it could probably do with some stiffer springs too. I wonder if the extra leaves from the Tamiya kits would fit. If we look under the chassis, you can see the front of the chassis rail is colliding with the front panel. There's enough plastic there, we should be okay cutting some slots for clearance. The front body mounts line up under the bonnet, and there's plenty of clearance there too. I think if we made a block that glued under the bonnet with a blind hole for the top of the body post, we could just about keep the body in position. It would just need a couple of chunky magnets to really hold it down. It's the same at the back, there's loads of space. If possible, I'm going to keep the body posts in their current position. That way I can swap to the Jeep body without having to adjust anything. And that just leaves one more thing. A quick run outside, driving ever so carefully so the body doesn't fall off. Now for a first large 3D printer project, I'm really quite happy with it. There's a few things I want to change of course, but it does work. And you can't miss that it's a Series 2. That's the main thing. I'm planning to release the files as a remix on Thingiverse, but I've not done that yet. I'll let you know when though. Right, so that's it for this week then. So as always, thanks for watching, like if you liked, and comment if you've got something to say. Bye guys!